Good afternoon and welcome to this Transform event entitled The Role of Education in Economic Recovery Post-COVID-19. This afternoon's session will last approximately 2 hours and will include a keynote address and panel discussions. Please include any questions or comments you may have in the chat section, and we will address as many as we can in the Q&A sessions. This event is being recorded and will be available for viewing and sharing. To begin, let me request Gill Caldicott, Country Director, British Council, to start the proceedings. Gill?
Good afternoon, and welcome to this virtual panel discussion on education post-pandemic in Sri Lanka. The debate is supported by the Transform report entitled Current Challenges, Future Directions, an overview of research exploring key challenges in education in Sri Lanka. And the debate addresses the question, is education a key to addressing the economic recovery of Sri Lanka? I would like to welcome our panel of speakers from both Sri Lanka and the UK and to thank them for all their time and their expertise that they will be bringing to today's discussion. As many of you know, we have recently been celebrating our anniversary of 70 years in Sri Lanka. And from the very beginning, the British Council's work in this country was closely associated with supporting education, whether that was by training teachers or working with departments of education, schools and universities to improve quality and to establish links with UK counterparts. In the UK, I believe it's true to say that the development and the reform of education is never done. It's ongoing. Approaches need to be constantly reviewed and refreshed because the environment in which we're living is constantly shifting and changing. Never more so now than when globally we face the prospect of economic recession and unemployment on a large scale. In these circumstances, the education system plays an unprecedented role in preparing young people for an uncertain future. What is certain, I am convinced, is that young people need 21st century skills. They need excellent communication ability to speak, to read and to write in English, as well as in Sri Lanka's national languages. They need to be entrepreneurial. They need to be creative, to have self-reliance and initiative. And so, just to return to the question for today, is education a key to addressing the economic recovery of Sri Lanka? I would like to hand over now to Louise Cowcher, Director English and Education for the British Council in Sri Lanka. Thank you.
Thank you, Gill. Hello, everyone. Welcome again. Here at the British Council, over quite a few years now, we've been working on our large-scale education programme, Transform. And we have been doing this in collaboration with partners within the government, the different ministries involved in delivering education, and increasingly with the private sector. The aim of the programme is to ensure that young people are able to benefit from learning opportunities provided by a fit-for-purpose and relevant education system, and that these young people will be able to fulfil their aspirations, reach their potential, and contribute to Sri Lanka's economic and social development. Now, of course, like any reform programme, we want to start from a point of evidence. So over the last few years, we've commissioned a range of research into topics as diverse as teacher education, careers guidance, whole school culture, a very varied approach to understand what are the challenges facing the education system here in Sri Lanka. And these research areas have reflected our own results areas in Transform, by looking at professionalisation, quality assurance, and transitions from education to employment. The research was launched in December 2019 at a symposium held in Colombo. The papers were coming from quite an academic perspective, with substantial information about the research questions, the methodology, and very critically, of course, the findings and recommendations. And those full reports are available on the British Council's website. However, a few months later, in February, March of this year, we felt that we, after discussion with our partners in the government, wanted to focus on the findings and the recommendations. So a refreshed version of the publication was developed, as I say, focusing on recommendations and the potential for practical actions to address the challenges. And that report is live on our British Council website. But then, of course, the pandemic hit. Huge impact on everybody's lives, their personal lives, their health, how they live their life, and of course on the economy. So substantial challenges globally in economic recovery. And we feel that education may be a key to that economic recovery. So this is where the idea for today's webinar came from, looking at the findings and the recommendations of our research and following through with our partners in both the private and the public sector in seeing which of those recommendations are not only relevant, but are even more important in today's context. It is a changing world. There are changing education opportunities. We are all familiar with the shift to move to online delivery as face-to-face has been challenging over the last months. And we're equally familiar with within our understanding that there are changes to the world of work. It's a different place out there now. We hope today's webinar will stimulate discussion, acknowledge the challenges that we have facing us, and explore ways in which we can address those challenges now for the benefit of all. So, in answer to the question, is education a key for economic recovery? I hope that the discussion today will go some way in helping us find those answers. It is now absolute pleasure. I would like to hand over to Professor Harishchandra Abeygunawardena, the Chair of the National Education Commission, to deliver his keynote address. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good afternoon to everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let me thank the British Council for organizing this important event and Ms. Louise for inviting me to deliver the keynote address. With that note, let me begin my presentation. It is universally accepted that education in every sense is one of the fundamental factors of economic development. I'm not an economist to give a theoretical explanation how the education catalyzes the economic development or economic revival in a country, yet I could state based on my understanding accrued through readings that the education, that is educating the people, and through that the building human resources, capital is one of the fundamental requirements for economic development. Few centuries ago, Adam Smith identified the acquired abilities of inhabitants are a kind of capital, what is now called human capital. And it is now considered one of the 4 types of capital that contribute to production in a national economy. Economists theorize that the nation's capability to use physical capital productively is a function of its level of human capital. And that if the human capital does not increase along with the physical capital, then the anticipated economic development cannot proceed. Having stated very briefly the importance of education in economic development, let me touch 2 interrelated subtopics relevant to the main theme of today's seminar. First one is countries' ability to respond to change, such as COVID-19 pandemic. And the second topic is the issues and challenges in education in Sri Lanka. Let me first briefly touch the first topic, that is the country's ability to respond to change, such as COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 pandemic is an unprecedented calamity. We still don't know where it will take us. However, one thing is clear, there were many such catastrophes in the past few centuries. Yet again, the world has survived and revived again to regain its original position or to a new normal. But different countries respond to challenges differently. Charles Darwin said, "It is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the most responsive to change." Unquestionably, it is the country's ability to respond to change is the key to succeed, and it's the ability of the countries to react quickly and positively. There are a few measures that assess the country's ability to respond to a change. One such measure is called Change Readiness Index, or CRI. The CRI measures how effectively a country's private and public enterprises, government, people and civil society anticipate, prepare for, manage, and respond to change and cultivate opportunity. CRI measures countries' change readiness against three categories. First category is enterprise capability, ability of state and private owned enterprises to manage change and grow within the dynamic economic environment. Second category is the government capability or the ability of the government or public institution to manage and influence change. Third category is the people and civil society capability, ability of the people and the wider society to cope with the change and respond to opportunities. Each pillar contains sub-indices assessed on secondary data and primary survey responses. For the purpose of our discussion, let's see what is included in pillar 3, people and civil society capability. Total scope people and civil society capability is the combination scores of following sub-indices: human capital, entrepreneurship, civil society, safety nets, technology use, gender, inclusiveness of growth, demographics, accessing information, and health. All these sub-indices are very closely linked to education. For example, human capital refers to educators, skilled workforce of a country, and it helps countries to adapt to change and compete globally. Measures include adult literacy, university enrollment rates, quality of institutions, and education offerings, etc. In entrepreneurship, it is the willingness and capacity of individuals or groups to develop, organize, and manage a business venture along with the kind of risk in order to make a profit. Technology use, the ability to generate and adopt new technologies, including social media, that can bring competitive advantages. And gender, empirically, it has been shown that countries grow slowly and respond slowly when women are not educated and do not participate fully in the paid labor force. Where does Sri Lanka stand in this assessment? It is positioned at 80 on the scale of 1 to 136. Switzerland is ranked number 1 and Singapore is positioned at number 2. The least prepared country in this scaling is Somalia. Among South Asian countries, Sri Lanka is ranked at number 3, behind India and Bhutan. This means Sri Lanka stands below average as of this index, and it has to move quickly to acquire the capacity to respond to change. In this context, building social and human capital is one of the indispensable prerequisites. Having stated Sri Lanka's position in this global index, let me concentrate on the main area of my presentation. That is the issues and challenges of education sector, or what are the key problems of education in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has achieved very impressive human development indices when compared with the regional and lower middle income countries. Moreover, the country has outperformed nearby South Asian countries on most of the Millennium Development Goals. About 96% of its citizens have completed primary school, 87% have finished secondary school, and there is gender parity in school completion at primary and secondary level. However, Sri Lanka lags behind other middle-income countries in terms of investment on education, access to higher education, and educational outcomes, and quality of human resources. In Sri Lanka, education is primarily nurtured by the state, and while its socio-political context has limited the private sector involvement in education, despite the state being the primary provider of education, Sri Lanka spends much less of its income on education and thus limiting the access to education, particularly to higher education opportunities. As a result, Sri Lanka now faces an acute shortage of adequately trained human resources that are needed for the advanced industrial and service sector activities. Sri Lankan education sector continuum of four subsectors, namely early childhood education sector, primary and secondary education sector, higher education sector, and technical and vocational education sector, what we call TVET sector. And all these subsectors are chronically constrained by many issues. It is imperative that the lingering issues of underfinancing, access, equity, quality and relevance of education should be addressed by improving the efficiency of use of current resources with concurrent increase of public and private investment. Let me very briefly discuss the key issues faced by three subsectors, namely primary and secondary education, technical and vocational education, and higher education. When it comes to primary and secondary education, Sri Lanka has made impressive progress in getting children into primary and secondary school education and having them complete up to 10 years of compulsory schooling. The main issue the country faces now is to bring learning achievements of Sri Lankan students in par with those of middle income and high income countries. The main issues that need remedial measures are limited type or streams of education offerings available to students, particularly in suburbs and rural schools, which deprives the opportunity for students to enroll in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Number two, conventional approach of content-based teaching and learning that promote memorization of factual knowledge as opposed to competent-based teaching and learning, which focuses on promoting understanding of concepts and imparting skills and competencies. Number three is the inadequacy of quality of teachers, disproportionate distribution and deployment, and absence of professional education cadre that promote competencies and professionalism among teachers. Fourthly, deficiencies in monitoring and student learning and achievements, shortcomings in governance and accountability, and then cost of financing in schools, and finally, the most importantly, the absence of effective career information and career guidance services in schools to guide students on diverse post-secondary education pathways. In the absence of effective career guidance and counseling service, the students are pushed by an examination-oriented teaching learning system with heavy reliance on private tuition. This is further aggravated by other limitations such as ignorance of parents and children, social value system that lend the many parents to persuade children to seek traditionally preferred, socially prestigious profession. Lack of coordination with other career education agencies such as Department of Labor, Department of Technical Education, Technical and Vocational Education Commission, Vocational Training Authority, and employers organizations such as Chambers of Commerce and Industry, and low wage rates of technical skilled labor prevailing in labor market. And then I will move to technical and vocational education and training. In the fiercely competitive global economy, Sri Lanka has to have not only advanced skills, but also workforce that can adjust to shift in demand. PEG at 57 out of 142 countries evaluated in the 2019 Global Competitiveness Index, Sri Lanka compares favorably with the rest of South Asia, but trails behind East Asian countries. It is well known that national drive for industrial growth is severely deterred by the shortage of technical skilled labor, and in addition to shortages, recent analysis reveals serious skill mismatches in the labor market. Recent analysis done by NEC reveals that the TVT sector is constrained by several factors. First is the complexity of the TVET system. The TVET sector is fragmented, uncoordinated, which undermines the sector performance and thus the potential to meet the skills needs of the country. Second one is a supply-driven TV system. Current TV systems and programs are large supply-driven with minimal involvement of private sector in determining what is required. Thirdly is inadequate and quantity and quality of teachers. That is shortage of qualified teaching staff, especially the staff with industrial experience. In addition, unattractive salaries and inadequate professional development undermines teacher motivation and make their retention difficult. Fourthly, inadequacy of modern equipment. Many centers lack equipment required for training. TVT graduates are often not workplace ready when they finish their courses. Fifthly, failure to implement national qualification framework. Though the national qualification framework is in place, it has not been fully implemented across all institutions of the TVT sector. And obviously, this has to be enforced across the sector to enhance the image of TVT graduates and promote employers' recognition of the benefit of NVQ qualifications. Sixthly, lack of autonomy and accountability. There is a lack of both institutional autonomy and accountability for performance. Therefore, public training providers are financed primarily by the national budget and allocation are provided irrespective of the performance. Therefore, there is no incentive for hard work for them. Defects in planning process. Then planning process does not regularly ascertain national and regional skills need based on the labor market information. There is no timely and accurate information about current demand for skills and available training opportunities. And finally, the inability to attract school leavers into TVT pathways. This is mainly due to its inability to offer attractive training environment and resources and low wage rates of TVET graduates, coupled with low social image. As a result, most TVET institutions are running in under capacity and experience heavy dropout rates. This is further aggravated by the absence of clear pathways for lateral mobility of TVT graduates into the conventional university system to earn a degree, which is the dream of every young person and parents, and also for their career advancement. Finally, I will touch the higher education sector, which I am coming from. Sri Lankan higher education sector faces many problems while trying to respond to the needs of the rapidly changing economy. There are two main constraints. They are the limited higher education and training opportunities offered to youth at the end of compulsory schooling and the inequities created by these limitations, and the quality and relevance of higher education and training offerings, which do not match with the labor market needs and expectation and international standards, and also are not flexible enough to adapt to the needs of the changing labor market. Let me explain very briefly a few specific issues related to these two major constraints, namely the access and participation, fields of study, quality of academic offerings, quality assurance, learning outcomes, labor market outcomes, and higher education financing. Access and participation. In global context, the participation in higher education by the 18 to 23-year age cohort, as measured by gross enrollment rate in higher education Sri Lanka, is exceptionally low for a middle-income country. Absence of a significant investment by the private sector is considered as one of the major reasons for failure to meet unprecedented demand for higher education. Then the fields of study, the distribution of students in public institutions by field of study is highly skewed towards the humanities and social sciences, that's so-called arts stream. Together, arts, law, management, and commerce accounted for 50% of total undergraduate enrollment in 2014, and science and engineering and architecture and computer science accounted for only 28%. Sri Lanka has, with this performance, has earned a special position in this context. It is ranked first out of 106 countries for the proportion of students reading for undergraduate degrees in humanities and social sciences. But it is only 79th out of 99 countries for the proportion in science and engineering. For engineering alone, it fares even worse. It is at 92nd position out of 103 countries. The highly skewed towards the humanities and social sciences in public institutions by field of study has created adverse consequences. In general, there is high unemployment and underemployment rates among humanities and social science graduates, and every government was under political pressure to accommodate unemployed, poorly prepared arts graduates into the state sector. Third is the quality of academic offerings in higher education, not only access is limited, but the existing programs' quality relevance are questionable. Relatively few students are enrolled in programs defined as national priorities, and many graduates remain idle for the extended period between graduation and their first job. Moreover, more than 50% of the employers, when interviewed, question the quality and relevance of university education with regard to conveying up-to-date knowledge and providing technical knowledge and skills in subject-specific areas. The academic training adopted in most disciplines are largely input-based, without much regard to requirements in the employment market. This is particularly true in humanities and social sciences. Moreover, the program deliveries relied mostly on teacher-centered approach with minimal application of modern ICT-based delivery tools, in spite of large investment in the recent past in building the capacity of in all state higher education institutions. Further, the institutional mechanism to ensure regular upgrading of program curricula, adopting outcome-based education and student-centered learning approach are not well internalized. The skills of the academic staff on the application of outcome-based education and student-centered learning approach are being upgraded, yet the pool of faculty staff with appropriate competencies is still insufficient. Learning opportunities to acquire non-cognitive skills have been significantly increased, but the availability of such courses or programs, for example, for English, information and communication, technology and career guidance, etc., is still limited. Then the quality assurance. In Sri Lanka, a quality assurance system in higher education was first introduced into the country in the early 2000. An institutional mechanism, that is the Quality Assurance Council for External Quality Assurance, was established at the UGC subsequently. Though there was assistance in early phases, QA is well received by the academia of all universities. External quality assurance system has progressed steadily, but internal quality assurance system within higher education institutions are yet to take off in many higher education institutions. Further, the quality assurance system needs to be strengthened further to proceed into accreditation of institutions, faculties, and study programs. However, UGC QA mechanism is concentrating mostly on public higher education institutions, as it has no mandate to extend to non-state higher education sector. Nonetheless, there is growing need to expand quality assurance and accreditation to all Sri Lankan higher education, including private ones. Then the learning outcomes, the area where divisions in learning outcomes are often flagged by the authorities and even more by the employers are non-cognitive skills, including communication, desire and ability to learn, and ability to work as a team. Then the labor market outcomes, as discussed previously, it has been factually shown graduates from crowded humanities and social sciences fields have difficulties in finding gainful employment. And when they do, often end up in sectors only distantly related to their fields of education, whereas the science, engineering, and IT graduates, who are relatively few, have little difficulty in finding a job and usually corresponds to their expertise and discipline. Then higher education financing. The most indicators suggest that higher education is in fact severely underfunded. At aggregate level, weighted against either GDP or total government spending, Sri Lanka devotes a relatively small share of its wealth and total government spending on higher education. In terms of GDP, Sri Lanka spends only 0.32% for higher education compared to India, 1.28%, South Korea, it is about 7.2%, Thailand, 0.71%, and Indonesia, 0.61%. In terms of percentage of government expenditure, Sri Lanka spends only 1.6% on higher education compared to Singapore, 1.75%, Vietnam, 3.6%, and Thailand, 2.9%, Japan, 1.9%. And all these countries have substantial private investment in higher education. Further, in contrast to most middle-income countries, the higher education in Sri Lanka depends almost all of their resources on government grants. As higher education expands and strives to boost quality, the situation will become unsustainable. Private financing will become a necessity. It has to come from users, combined with student aid schemes to ensure equity, and from investment by private sector providers. In conclusion, let me sum up what I have said so far. Sri Lanka is not positioned well to experience a rapid economic recovery in post-COVID-19 pandemic. It faces many challenges such as getting the state and private-owned enterprises to manage change and grow within the dynamic economic environment. Number two, getting the government and public institutions to manage and influence change. And number three, getting the people and wider society to cope with the change and respond to opportunities. In this context, Sri Lankan education sector, the key players such as policymakers, line ministries, commissions and the councils, training institutions, academia, and teachers have an indispensable role to play in overcoming these key deficiencies mentioned in my deliberation. Thank you. That's all I want to share at this point.
Thank you, Professor Abeygunawardena. I hope those who have logged in will take this opportunity, because there was lots of food for thought in what he had to say, and take this opportunity to comment and ask questions. Please put them in the public chat and we will take them up in the Q&A session later. I will now introduce the first panel, and the first panel discussion is on the topic professionalization and quality assurance. And the panelists are Professor Nilanthi de Silva, Director Quality Assurance Council, University Grants Commission, Dr. Jayantha Balasooriya, Director Policy and Planning, Ministry of Education, Dr. Sophie Foley, Associate Professor, Edinburgh, Napier University, and the discussion will be moderated by Professor Deepthi Bandara, Senior Professor, University of Peradeniya. Please remember to include your comments and questions in the chat so that we can take them up at the end of the session.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. So this is the panel for professionalization and quality assurance in this webinar on education for economic recovery post-COVID-19. And the three panelists have been introduced to you now, and we will start with Professor Nilanthi on what she has to say in higher education about professionalization and quality assurance of our education. Professor Nilanthi.
Thank you, Deepthi. Thank you to the British Council for inviting me to speak a few words at this on this webinar. As Professor Harishchandra mentioned a little while ago, we do have a national framework for higher education, and we also have a national qualifications framework. Now, the UGC adopted this current version of the SLQF in 2016 and requested all of the state universities under the UGC to adopt this SLQF and abide by it. And the same thing has been done by the Ministry of Higher Education, I know, for the non-state degree awarding institutes. So this SLQF goes up level 1, which is the ordinary level, GC ordinary level, right up to level 12, which is the doctorate level. And it sets out 12 categories of generic learning outcomes that are expected of the qualification holders at each of these levels. And these learning outcomes cover the domains, all of the important domains of learning, knowledge, skills, attitudes, as well as a mindset that sets students on a path to lifelong learning. So how does this document, which is a little book, translate into students' lived learning experience? So as of now, what the UGC has tried to do, and Deepthi knows this very well, don't you, Deepthi, is that
Sure.
when university seeks approval from the UGC to introduce a new degree program, the course curriculum must include a graduate profile. And this graduate profile has to inform, is there so that it informs students, teachers, as well as prospective employers about the competencies that are expected of that qualification holder, so that we change focus from teacher-centered education to an outcomes-based education. And the curriculum also has to identify how these program learning outcomes are appropriate to the relevant SLQF level and how they relate to each course unit or component on that program of study. and there must be appropriate course content, teaching, learning activities, assessments, etc., to ensure that this is consistent across the entire program of study. In addition to that, we have adopted a policy of encouraging all faculties to review and revise their undergraduate curricula at least every 5 years. And during this process, faculties are expected to ensure that curricula become SRQF compliant, because sometimes we find that curricula have been in use for fairly long periods of time, sometimes decades, without revision. So in that way, we hope that we will be able to drive this process of change from a teacher-centered learning opportunities to a more outcome-based, student-centered learning process.
Okay, so we will stop at that with Nilanthi for now, since we've gone like 7 minutes. And Nilanthi, maybe you can come back later if we have some time. And we would like to now go with Dr. Jayantha Balasooriya. Sir, what would you like to say about professionalization and quality assurance in general education?
Yes, thank you, Deepthi. Education and the today discussion, we are in the economic aspect as well as the education sector. That is a very important sector. With regard to the professionalization of education, that is the very crucial issue, and also it is a sensible issue in the system. With regard to the, we are talking about the improving learning outcomes of students. As you know, due to the current situation, we are facing big challenges with regard to the two major shocks in education. First one is actually we are thinking about the students' learning outcome, especially for the improving transferable skills or 21st century skills, etc., and also communication skills, speaking English, speaking skills like that. Then also due to the interruption of the education, the closure of the school system, we are taking challenges for the improving quality of education, and also it is included in the health issues also. In the long term, we are facing some challenges to the education cost and the society issues. In this regard, we are thinking about the improving quality of education. For that purposes, we have to develop in the quality of teachers. Now, the government and the Ministry of Education, we are thinking and working towards to the improving the professionalization. Earlier, we are talking about the student-teacher ratio. That means the STR we are normally using. Now we are talking about the professional teachers and the student ratio in the school system. That is the we have to think. Other one is that every child have a human right to obtain their education or receiving their learning from the professionally qualified teachers. That's why the government has the committed to provide professional teachers for every school across the country. Therefore, the government have now talking about the improving the quality of education. For that purposes, we are now thinking about the improving professional teachers from the school education, from those who are learning from the College of Education, from those who are out from the university education. That is the challenge, and also we are taking that challenge, the Ministry of Education. Therefore, now the current education reforms agenda, we are talking to establish the professional services for the teachers, including ISS and the teacher educators and other relevant services. That is the taking the measures for the upgrading knowledge and the skills of the teachers that will ultimately impact for the improving the students' learning outcome. The other one is when we are talking and the implementation of the some program for the improving quality of education, it is compulsory, essential to have the quality assurance program. Therefore, we are talking about the evaluation system and also some monitoring and evaluation system, maintaining the quality assurance of students. This is not only for the students' learning outcome, but also other aspects like facilities and the teaching methodologies like that. Every aspect now we are in one framework, one umbrella for that purposes. these two, professionalization and the quality assurance, are analogous. Those are coincide programs in the education system. That is the program. Therefore, we have to think about some curriculum reforms and the other management reforms also needed for that purposes. Those are the currently we are talking, and also we are taking expect. For that purposes, British Council also and the other development partners also highly supported for the implementation of such programs, the professionalization. And also we are now working all the schools, school-based professional teacher development program. Earlier we are talking about the capacity development program outside the schools. The teachers are taking outside from the school. Now we are talking about the on-site. I mean the on-site teacher development program. That is the one development of this the professionalization in the country. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Balasooriya. So we will now get on with Dr. Sophie. Would you like to share some experiences from the UK? Sophie? Sophie, go ahead. Sophie cannot be heard. Okay, good. Go ahead.
Can I start again? Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
When we engage with quality assurance in the education sector, we're actually setting a responsibility to provide a relevant education, so an education of purpose and of value. So if we're to play a key role in the economic recovery from the effects of the pandemic, it is clear then that the education sector needs to align its teaching and learning provision to actually better meet the needs of business and employers. From the work that I have undertaken previously with the UGC and with academic colleagues across the state university sector in Sri Lanka, I know that conversations about the relevant curriculum have already been taking place pre-pandemic. And some of this is reflected in the British Council Transform Project report on research impact and quality assurance in higher education. But the context has somewhat changed. It has become more complex, more challenging. The crisis we're dealing with is at another scale. It's a global economic crisis. It extends beyond the borders of Sri Lanka, and that in itself will have an added impact on Sri Lanka. The pandemic has also hugely accentuated the inequalities in our society and also in our workplace. We also cannot forget the other global crisis that we were all discussing pre-COVID-19, and that is of climate change. So when we think of the future, I know the phrase jobs of the future is possibly overused, but it is actually particularly pertinent in the context of economic recovery from this pandemic. As plans for recovery are developed, new jobs and occupations will emerge, and others will either completely disappear or partly disappear. And certainly, skill sets that are required in most employment sectors will change. So as educators, we need to be more open from industry, from the health sector, from government sectors, and also from our and alumni. And then we need to design our curriculum in response to that. And if we truly engage and we truly listen to those conversations, then this should impact on the portfolio of the programs that we deliver, right through to the specific learning outcomes that we state at module and subject level within our programs. And of course, all of this has to be supported by the appropriate quality assurance processes and also by evidence-based approaches. I think it's also important, though, to draw some tips from the experience that we've been going through. One of the striking features of the education sector as we've reacted to the pandemic was the speed and the extent to which universities in particular across the world moved to online teaching. And while we did this in response to a crisis, a positive outcome is that we will see an increase in the use of online platforms, be that for the complete online delivery of programs or for a more blended approach. So we will need to rethink our practice of teaching, And inevitably, we will need to provide professional development to our educators in aspects such as digital fluency, but also better pedagogic approaches to teaching, learning, and assessment. And also, as mentioned previously by other speakers, the use of student-centered or collaborative learning. In terms of quality assurance processes, as universities went into lockdown, we also witnessed a rapid implementation of changes to assessments, to module learning outcomes, to academic regulations, for instance. And this agility of response across the university sector was quite amazing. So as we work through the next phase of living with this virus, another positive to reflect upon is how can we maintain a certain agility in our quality assurance processes so that our provision continues to be quality benchmarked, and do so in a way that fosters adaptation, risk, innovation. And going back to an earlier point, the importance of professionalization also extends to other roles within the education sector. So not just our teachers and our lecturers. Earlier on, there was a brief mention about the qualifications framework, and so I'd like to just finish maybe with a couple of comments on that. To effectively support the economic recovery, we need to think about our students not just working their way through education from childhood to adulthood. We also need to think about individuals who are in our current workforce. We need to support the transferability of credit between institutes, and in particular between vocational and university training. So we need increased flexibility, and we need a qualification framework that reflects that. And that agility is the economic recovery, but also to put us in a better position to deal with future global disruptions. We also need these qualifications to be recognized, and international benchmarking goes beyond just recognition of a qualification based on duration of study or number of credits. It's also about the quality, the reputation, the academic reputation and standing. It relates back to the relevance of our provision, the quality of our provision, the quality of our delivery, the quality of our assessment of student performance, for example. So I think I'll stop there.
Okay, thanks, Sophie. So we've heard all three panelists now, and there's time, 12 minutes actually, for questions. I'm seeing some on the host chat, and I would like to start with one which has been posted, and this is probably to Dr. Balasooriya. Is there a proper QA system in our general education? Dr. Balasooriya. So if we are to maintain professionalization and quality assurance, the question is there a proper QA system for our general education?
Yes, Deepthi, we do have the quality assurance program for the school education system. That is at the school level, the different type of programs we are conducting. I mean, some of the programs are implemented at the school level and the provincial level as well as the national level. The national level is the responsible for the maintaining the quality of across the country. Despite the national school or the provincial school, all the schools are come under that programs. And also independent evaluation system also we are conducting. There are a number of items, number of criteria using in the quality assurance program to maintain measure the quality of school level from the teaching learning from the classroom level as well as the school level, and also the zonal and the teacher education centers, college of education, like that. Those are the areas covered through the quality assurance programs, proper quality assurance program. In the very recently, there are some the improvement also going on. Now currently have some discussion under the education reforms agenda, and also in the future we will have the sound quality assurance program in the system. That will ultimately, we are focusing on the quality of education as well as the improving learning outcomes of the students. That is the main focus on the quality assurance programs in education, school education.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Balasooriya. So since most of the questions are, mostly on one line, I will try to rephrase these questions and ask. We know that during the pandemic, almost all education systems had to go digital almost overnight. And therefore, teachers had to do, hurried up jobs as to convert their delivery methods to online. However, we also know that when universities confer their qualifications on their graduates, that they have to certify that the graduates come up to a certain level of competence. As was said by Professor Abeygunawardena, competence-based education, which means, outcomes are crucial. So how would someone ensure that the outcomes that were defined pre-COVID will be maintained in the post-COVID age or times? Anybody would like to answer of the three panelists? So if we want to have professionalization and quality assurance, one of the key factors is that we maintain our learning outcomes, our program outcomes. How do you propose that our educational systems, the higher educational institutes, the state universities, the schools, try to maintain these outcomes as to what they were and defined pre-COVID in the post-COVID age? Nilanthi, would you like to go first?
This is quite a challenge.
Sophie, go ahead.
Sophie, would you like to answer?
So I think this is quite a challenge, and also because, I think this is a challenge for all of us, and in particularly because we are not quite post-pandemic. So, we have dealt with a situation in the last few months, and we did it in crisis mode. And we made decisions very rapidly in order to protect the interests of our students and ensure that they could achieve the credit and that they could graduate and gain their qualifications. But now we're preparing for the following trimesters, and we are still in a crisis. So we are preparing for online, we are preparing for face-to-face, we're preparing to be able to move very quickly between the two types of modes of delivery. And for certain disciplines, there are particular challenges in terms of meeting learning outcomes. So for example, those disciplines that are heavily practical-based, hands-on based curriculum. And so we are in the UK, many universities and my own university, we are undertaking work to kind of separate out the skills that we learn through the hands-on part of the curriculum, so the skills in critical thinking and data analysis and interpretation, separate those out from the actual practical part, so that we can develop and assess certain skills, even if, for example, laboratory classes are disrupted in the forthcoming months.
Okay.
So we are still very much in crisis mode at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Sophie. So would Nilanthi, would you like to add on?
Yeah, I think that is pretty much the policy that we are following in Sri Lankan universities too, that to separate out the stuff that can be done online by students and teachers using whatever virtual learning delivery platforms that are available, particularly Zoom, and then keeping the practical hands-on classroom activities, laboratory classes, clinical training, etc., for a time when we can come back and have physical face-to-face learning activities. I think Sri Lanka is a little bit more fortunate than the UK in the sense that we've had less problems with COVID, but we've been kind of slow to get back into action, and we've been very cautious. And I hope that we will learn to live with COVID and get back into academic activities in the not too distant future. I fear that in Sri Lanka, the price that we will have to pay for this is that students will have extended periods of time in the university system, because I think academics here will not be happy to allow students to graduate until they feel that they have completed the coursework and met the learning outcomes that have been identified pre-COVID. And so there will be then an inevitable already our academic calendar is not in very good shape, and this is going to make it worse, but we will still need to ensure that students meet the expected learning outcomes. Don't know how it's going to be done in the general education sector.
Dr. Balasooriya, you would like to add something?
Yeah, sure. Actually, during the COVID pandemic period, the Ministry of Education and the National Institute of Education and other respective agencies, we are working together to the implementation of the technology blended learning methods using in the modern technologies like LMS and the mobile application, web-based and television-based lesson showing the promising results during the pandemic period. That will be highly supported for the continuation of the teaching, students learning at home, stay at home. That is also as one of the positive impact of.
Are we frozen?
We seem to have lost
Dr. Balasooriya, have we lost him? Seems like it. Nilanthi and Sophie, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So till we get Dr. Balasooriya back, I will pose a very quick question to maybe Nilanthi and Sophie. It is true that teachers have tried hard to make the delivery part of the teaching okay, at least for the moment. But it seems like that the pandemic is quite unpredictable and every new day is a new normal. Under the circumstances, how do you think we will ensure good assessment of the outcomes whenever post-COVID sets in?
Shall I have a go with that?
Please.
Yeah. I think in Sri Lanka we've been maybe some of the IT faculties that are more comfortable with using technology have been trying to do some of the student assessment online, but by and large our teachers are very uncomfortable with doing formal assessments online, and that is something that they will put off until we have students back in class. And so one strategy that we have been adopting while having the problems with COVID, the restrictions and the social distancing, is to bring in students on campus one batch at a time, and then give them their assessments, deal with the final year students, get them out, let them graduate as quickly as possible, and then wait until things normalize a little bit more. But Sophie, it's probably different in the UK.
Sophie, do you want to add something?
Yes, so I think in the UK we have been having this debate for quite some time. But can you hear me? Yeah. I think in the UK we've been having a debate for quite some time about the appropriateness of exams to assess students and to assess learning outcomes. And it's been quite an active debate. And this pandemic has actually forced us to move very quickly to adjusting our end of trimester assessments. So, we went into lockdown in the UK just as we were completing trimester 2. And so now we are having conversations about the coming trimesters and about planning for assessment, if possible, without using exams. And this is a challenge to design valid assessments, and also because, for some of us, we have been using exams as our assessment instrument for decades now. And so we have to rethink our approach. There's also another challenge with that, and that is with qualifications that are governed by an accreditation body.
Sure.
And so we also have to work with the accrediting bodies in the design of that appropriate assessment.
Okay, thank you, Sophie and Nilanthi and Jayantha. I think it's 3:30 now, and the 30 minutes given for this panel is now over. So thank you very much to the 3 panelists. I guess if there are more questions, we can try and handle them in the open session later on. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you to our first panel. Our second panel discussion is on the topic transitions to employment. And the panelists are Professor Tinaka Brunfor, Professor Lancaster University, Janaka Jayalath, Acting Director General, Tertiary and Vocational Education Commission, Paddy Paul, Board Member and Honorary Secretary, Tourism Sector Skills Council, and the panel will be moderated by Krishan Pereira, Director, Career Development, IESC, ULEAD. Once again, please remember to include your comments and questions in the chat so that we can take them up at the end of the session.
Thank you, Nilanthi. A very good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our second panel, and the theme for this panel is transition to employment. As we all very well aware, education is very vital for economic and social development, but in the current context, it's more towards the economic recovery. So while we have promising state strategies as well as activities going on, it is essential to create a dialogue in participation with private sector as well as educational stakeholders to understand their role and the engagement in between education as well as employment. So this is an exercise where assortment and organizations need to work hand in hand to achieve the common goal of transforming youth into employment. So therefore, without further ado, let me present my first question to our intellectual panel in this evening. So my first question goes to Tinaka. What are the skills that employers need, and is English one of them? Tinaka, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Good day. The short answer to your question is yes, absolutely. And these are not my words, but those of employers within Sri Lanka, actually. As part of the Transform program, we surveyed and interviewed employers in Sri Lanka from a wide range of sectors, from small-scale businesses to some of the very largest companies with a base in Sri Lanka. And more than 2/3 of the employers said they struggled to recruit people with the right skills. And the most frequently mentioned skill these employers said they had difficulty in recruiting people with were communication skills. And they specifically mentioned English. They reported issues with levels of oral and written communication, but also with confidence levels of people in communicating in English. And this leads then to issues on the work floor, to extra work, to damage to the company image and the reputation and so on. And virtually all the employers in our study, they stated that employees at their companies needed some level of English to effectively carry out their job. Obviously, there are differences between jobs. So for some, a basic level is sufficient, typically for more operational jobs. But for other roles, an intermediate or a high level of English is considered crucial. And English is not just important for ongoing operations of companies, but the employers also stated it's critical for the growth of the companies and, in the current situation, the economic recovery of the companies, as well as the Sri Lankan economy more broadly. And when they talked about growth, the employers were talking about two different things. On the one hand, expansion and regeneration of existing companies, and on the other hand, also attracting and developing new sectors of employment within Sri Lanka. And I think what is crucial is that these employers identified sort of three areas of benefits of the workforce with English proficiency. The first one is probably quite as expected, given English's status as a global lingua franca in business, in research, in innovation. There are obvious benefits of good English proficiency in relation to access to international markets, attracting foreign investors, increasing the competitive position of companies in Sri Lanka. But in the current pandemic situation, I think we are also aware that we've become well, we've come to rely more and more on online and global communication. And a lot of this is through the medium of English. We've seen an enormous scaling up in this regard. And I think we need to be aware that proficiency in English might be even more crucial in this online environment, because in this kind of environment, there's fewer affordances or compensation mechanisms for things such as miscommunication, communication breakdown, and so on. A second benefit that was discussed by employers in Sri Lanka is they see English proficiency equally important within the country itself. So even for local companies who are not focused on global markets, because those companies also need to keep pace with technological and research innovations to stay modern in a way. They need to be able to have an informed workforce so that they can increase the efficiency and the productivity within country as well, and reduce dependence on, for example, local government jobs. So it can help with economic diversification within the country. And then the third type of benefit that was put forward by employers is that English has great potential for communication across groupings within the country to help maintain a stable environment for businesses. And I think this is quite important. So to play a role in intercultural communication and resulting in a stable business environment within country and also internationally. So yes, English is certainly a skill that employers see as vital. And in fact, there is a lot of research that has shown that language is also an economic variable.
Thank you, Tineke, for sharing those valuable insights with us. We are pleased to learn the context from both global and local perspectives. With that, I would like to make a shift from employer segment into a broader sectorial question. So the best person in the panel to answer this question is Paddy. Paddy, what skills do sectors need? And is there any change in priorities to address this economic recovery? Over to you.
Good afternoon to everyone. Good afternoon to those who are listening in as well. Thank you, British Council and Louise team for putting this program together, which is extremely timely, I feel. I also thank Janaka for giving us an insight into how important English is, particularly in the tourism sector. Tourism actually is the medium language worldwide, and unless all our educationists accept the fact that English is crucial and it needs to be added to every part of our curriculum. I would like now to touch on a few key issues, what makes the private sector and the education sector not jiving as we like it to be, for example. So there is a mismatch. As Professor Abeygunawardena said, we really need to look at the education system in schools, in universities, in private institutions, and also in vocational training. I would think the need of the hour is for all stakeholders to sit around the table and first ask the question, what kind of skills do we really need post-COVID?
Yeah, Paddy, yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you please come closer to the screen so that we can hear you better?
You can't hear me?
Yes, much better.
Much better, sorry. Okay. So I think it's very, very important for everyone to sit around the table and then analyze what is the requirement of the industry, in particular the private sector, because the whole world is evolving. more so post-COVID. So what we are doing, what we plan to do last year may not be what we really need now. So I think that is a crucial thing. And while universities and schools are planning their curriculums and all of that, I think input from private sector is vital. The next issue, I think, is the career guidance. I think the career guidance is also extremely vital for children, students of all levels, right from schooling to universities, because when they leave, when they leave school, they are quite confused. Then they go to the university, then probably they have not got the credits that they want. They want to be a graduate, they do something, then they come out, they feel they have spent so much time and they cannot get what they want. So again, it's the guidance of, to be able to give a proper roadmap to the child is extremely important. And the people who are delivering this guidance is more vital, I think. So a continuous update on what can be offered to these students is an extremely important part for the private sector, because what comes out must be acceptable to the different industries. The other thing is, I think, the awareness building. As I think Professor Balasooriya also mentioned, it is very important that country-wise and industry-wise, we educate even children, parents, society at large, what the skills and what different employment that is available. For example, if you take tourism, we are trying to get females to the industry, but it's so tough because the perception is you are going into a hotel, you are interacting with foreigners, you break your hours of work. So I do not want to go, or even if the child wants to go, the society doesn't allow it, the parents don't allow it. So this awareness, I think, is also another very important part of the build-up, shall I say, and the skills building is so important. Last but not least, the curriculum updates are also extremely important. What we did last year may not be actually what we need today, because technology is overtaking everything. So sitting behind a desk and studying is probably not, will not be acceptable anymore. So children have to be tech savvy. Everybody has to be given Wi-Fi. So I think the whole world is changing, and as a result, I think Sri Lanka has to adapt itself to be able to handle the challenges. I hope I have answered your question, Prashant.
Yes, thank you very much for those insights, Paddy. I think the key takeaways from your answer also, like, it's very important to understand the importance of career awareness as well as parental awareness in terms of employment opportunities. So as we construct this dialogue, the next most important piece of this dialogue is the education and learning. So my next question goes to Janaka. What is happening at the point of learning? So over to you.
Thank you, Krishan. Good afternoon, and thank you, British Council, for giving this opportunity to me, my institute, Tertiary and Vocational Education, Vocational Education Commission, which is the apex body for Tibet in Sri Lanka. Actually, the point of learning, before that, I think the transition, we have to take care of the transitions, basically from school to Tibet, and Tibet to employment. Address these three transitions in learning paradigm. And in that, in Sri Lanka Tibet sector, we were able to introduce competency-based training in 2004 and actually unify the all qualifications, because earlier we had different qualifications with different durations, different levels. Now, after introducing the National Vocational Qualification Framework in 2004, we were able to unify the system with the 7-level qualification structure, which each and every level will define. From that onwards, as Professor Harishchandra said at the keynote address, this is a very complex area. I would rather say this is not only complex, it's difficult. Because even when we say it's a TVET, mostly it was branded and as this is the sector for failures. If they cannot go to the university, people try to blockade them in TVET. I think that should not be the case, because mostly if students have the aptitude or have the interest to particular technology or vocational field, they must be attracted to the sector. So we have different tools to attract. One is the career guidance, and in the field of career advice and guidance, we have introduced different tools where they can find what are the fields or what are the sectors they are good at before selecting a career. So career means that when they select a career, there are so many occupations or so many jobs in the field. So they have to select one field because we have, so far we have developed like 500 odd qualifications. From that, they can choose one and join to the NVQ level, maybe 3 or 4, and they can go up to the ladder up to level 7, which is the degree level. This is very good opportunity for their career progression, and they can go up in the ladder, as well as there are lateral entries. Students who have done other programs at different levels can enjoy the entry at different levels. Also, the students going out of the NVQ system, they can go to other university or other higher education institutes with the NVQ level, which is recognized in Sri Lanka as well as the region, because we have taken measures to assure the quality of the programs. Actually, for the quality of the programs, we have 3 tools. One is the registration of the programs at very basic quality. And second one is the accreditation of programs, which we look at them to align at a national curriculum. And the third level is quality management system. With these 3 tools, we ensure the quality of these programs and at the offerings, and we maintain continuous assessment as formative assessments and summative assessment and final assessment with the competency-based assessments, which is the final, and issuing the certificate. With this, they are ensured a quality training, and very recent update, we have extended that framework little further with employment. Recently, we introduced National Skills Passport, which was launched in 15th July, the World Youth Skills Day. This is very important to Sri Lanka because we have proposed this World Youth Skills Day to the UN from Sri Lanka, and that actually commemorated worldwide now. And if a person is having 1 year, at least 1 year employment experience with National Vocational Qualification, they can apply for National Skills Passport, which is a smart card, and if they can produce this smart card instead of their long CVs. This smart card is QR coded. Anyone can authenticate from any device, and this is, I think, this will go a long way with the recognition of skills in Sri Lanka. I think that is
Great.
the point of learning from Tibet.
Thank you so much, Janaka, for sharing those promising strategies and activities. I hope this will continue to remain in the best interest of the institutions mentioned. So we have very limited time for questions and answers, but I have a very quick question for all three panelists. It's going to be an open question. Is this just TVEC, or is this relevant to secondary and higher education as well? So I would like to get the answer in a very brief way from Paddy first.
Did we follow the question, Prashant?
Yeah, is this just for TVEC, or is this relevant for secondary or higher education as well? The points what we discussed, is this relevant for TVEC, or is this applicable for secondary and higher education sectors as well?
Okay. Shall I start?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I'll focus on language and the role for the economy. And I talked about English as a lingua franca and the role for international communication, competitiveness, innovation, language as an economic variable. But I think what is important is, and this relates then to not just TVET, but secondary and higher education, is we need to keep in mind that learning language and learning English is not just about learning the language itself in the narrow sense. We need to recognize that language learning has an enabling role. It brings with it transferable skills. So in our Transform project, for example, the employers mentioned that they also had recruitment challenges for people with cognitive skills, such as critical thinking, problem solving, analytic skills, presentation skills, management and leadership skills. So this goes a lot further, and this is very applicable to secondary and higher education as well. These are all skills in which language abilities play a huge role. So language learning and English language learning that is designed to be relevant and fit for purpose would also equip the secondary and the higher education levels with those language-related abilities to think critically, analytically, solve problems, have interpersonal skills in terms of communication that they mean they can lead teams and so on. So I guess we could link this up to what Professor Abeygunawardena said in his keynote speech, that with English language learning in mainstream education is also an investment in the human capital of the country. And so it's about including transferable skills that can contribute to the local and the global opportunities for the country.
Okay, thank you so much, Tineke. Janaka, you want to give your insights about the question. Is this only for TVEC, or is that can be applied for general and higher education as well?
My view, Krishan, this can be applied in general for those all who are interested, because in the national policy also we propose to have a unified system even for career guidance. So from any field there should be a possibility, maybe go up in the ladder from career progression or the education progression. Maybe they can switch from one sector, one field to some other field of their choice. So from there they can go up in the ladder. Also there should be a pathways to TVET to university and higher education and higher education to TVET. So there could be easy transition from and switchable plans for the students. And the career guidance is the key for all these options, because we must guide the newcomers or the students, and we have to show what are the options that available in different sectors, not only TVET, maybe some other sectors as well. Maybe not only Sri Lanka, maybe other countries as well. So we have to open the pathways, then only they can see the world. With the president's declaration of skills development decade from last 15th of July, I think Sri Lanka is going to give a very good prominence to the TVT sector, which is a good sign for all of us.
Right. Thank you very much, Janaka. Paddy, over to you from the sector experience and sector perspective.
I think it is applicable across the board. Like the two panelists had mentioned, I think the mismatch, the career guidance in particular, revisions, all have to be done from school to higher education to vocational training. I think it's just across the board. I agree.
Okay, so thank you very much. So that brings to the end of our panel dialogue for today. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank our panelists from both Sri Lanka and the UK. So thank you, Tenake, for connecting all the way from UK, and Janaka, despite of your very busy schedule as the Acting Director General of TVET, and Paddy for your representation as the voice of the sector. Thank you so much. And our questions and answers can be presented during the general question and answer session.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure to be part of this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to our panel. I think we can move on to the general question and answer session now. Dr. Jayantha Balasooriya, I think you got we lost you mid answer earlier. So could we have you back on again so that you can complete your response? I will put up I'll ask the question again to refresh everybody's memory. It's how is the education system coping with student assessments during this COVID period? Basically, how is the general education system? How will it conduct student assessments? That was the question, and we lost your mid-response. You couldn't hear.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, of course. So the question you were responding to was, how is the education system coping with student assessments during this COVID period? You were responding to that and we lost you.
Yes.
I don't know whether we've lost Dr. Jayantha again. I will move on to another question and maybe we can bring him back. So this is over. That was a question on our chat. Let me just pull it up. We had a comment from Tilak Priyadarshana who said absolutely true. National HE policy is only a national document, but has not considered when building the higher education in the country. Would someone like to pick that up? Or should we ask Professor Abeygunawardena?
Yes, I like to answer that.
Wonderful, thank you.
Basically, the arrangement is that National Education Commission is the apex level body for making policy recommendation to the His Excellency President. But the NEC is empowered by an act which clearly says that the mandate of the commission. But at the same time, the act itself says that the right to frame policies for line ministries by the ministers is also not taken away by this act. So therefore, what happened is that the NEC prepares regular intervals, policy documents for all subsectors and submit to the president. And president tables these things at the cabinet of ministers, and obviously the relevant ministries have to take it up. So what happened is that usually the line ministries start preparing their own policies. Obviously, they will give due consideration to the recommendation made by the National Education Commission. So it is there, but I would say it is not 100% perfect. We like to have broader dialogue NEC wishes to have with the line ministries when they make their own policies. So to ensure that their policies are in alignment with what has been recommended by the National Education Commission. Hopefully, we plan to do this more streamlining and more dialogue, more communication with ministries in time to come. So with the present president in-house, Paddy is very keen on education, and therefore I hope that the situation will improve in the future.
Thank you, Professor Abeygunawardena. There is also another question which you may like to respond to. How involved are students in quality assurance in higher education? Do their opinions and experiences matter? I think Dr. Nilanthi also might like to take a shot at that.
Can I respond? Yes. So I think the involvement of students and the fact that we need to have students acknowledging and realizing that their voice is something that is really necessary to be heard, but in a way that is constructive, not through protests and pelepali, that kind of thing, but in a way that enables their teachers and people who are responsible for conduct of educational programs to build the students' viewpoint and their perspective into improving the quality of education that we offer. I think that is something that is really important and is undervalued, underestimated in our country, in our higher education system at the moment. However, we need to build mechanisms by which staff are more comfortable in listening to students, and that students are also empowered in being given the right language with which to express their viewpoint. Not in terms of protests and processions and shouting and just a tussle for power, but actually constructive suggestions for how things can be done at all levels. So it can be at a module level, post-unit level, it can be at the level of a program of study, it can be at the level of a faculty or the university. But we need to educate people in how to engage in that dialogue. And I hope that we've started that ball rolling with the support of the British Council and the University of the West of Scotland team that was with us a few months ago.
Would anyone else like to add to that, or shall I move on to the next question? Okay, so there's also a question about international benchmarking. Are we doing any international benchmarking? For example, professional standards for teachers.
Yeah, actually, in the TVET sector, we benchmarked the UK, Australia, and New Zealand systems for our qualification framework and different curriculum development formats and various other things. And also that in the development process of national competency standards, we benchmark the standards from various countries, because we don't need to develop from scratch or develop from zero, because there are so many standards and other resources already developed in the world. So we have to benchmark that and see what is happening in the world and whether we can customize those things into our context. That is the way that we do in the TVET sector.
Okay. Janaka, would you like to also respond to that? Or shall I ask you the next question? Because I think there's another question that you might like to respond to. How can we bring the world of work? Sorry. How can we bring How can we bring the world of work into the secondary classroom? I think this person is thinking about the big gap there is, from school to university to work. It's a bit of a culture shock. Sure. So can we bridge that?
Actually, we have identified this issue, I think, 5 years ago, because if you know, in the early system, there was a vocational activities in the schools, but with the different reforms and different inputs, that was not there very recently. And I think 5 years back, we started the process of vocationalization of the school's curriculum. That was the starting of the technology subjects in the school curriculum. And later we introduced the 13 years education program, which the students are directly directed to the TVET system from the school, where they are given a basic training and orientation. That are the two main incidents or the activities we have introduced in the TVET sector and the school sector in the vocationalization aspects.
So what does this orientation look like? Would you like to elaborate on what the orientation looks like?
Actually, when they come to the year 12, they are given basic knowledge about the vocational streams, and in the basic training, they are given the career guidance and various other foundation programs to set the scene into the TVET sector. So they are given with a choice of selection of different streams, different courses, and there's a smooth transition from school to TVET sector, because earlier the system was from the schools they left and they are in nowhere because they cannot find, they are not guided in that process. Now here they are well guided to the programs. They are the school system sending the particular list of names to the TVET sector for enrollments. I think that is well connected, not like earlier system.
Thank you. We have Dr. Jayantha back again. Dr. Jayantha, can you pick up where you left off, please?
Yes, actually, come back to the international benchmark, the education system, with regard to the teachers' qualification. Currently, as well as the previously, the Ministry of Education, we are using the international experiences as well as the benchmark for determine the teacher qualification framework, especially for the English language program. With the technical assistance of the British Council, we implement the transport system. There is capacity development of the teachers and the teacher educators. That when we are developing in the teacher educators qualification framework, we usually chiefly using the international experiences as well as the international benchmark. That is the one thing. And also we using the capacity of the teachers and also students assessment. That is the one of the, for the school term test marks, when we are marking for the English language, especially for the speaking and the writing skills, we use it that type of the benchmark also. That is the one of the areas. And come back to the 13 years program in the Ministry of Education with the collaboration of the TVET sector, we are implementing the 13 years mandatory with the program. That is especially students, those who are not qualified for the academic part, or for a say like they are not qualified for the entering in the higher education or the university education, but they are having some skills or the capable for doing the technical and vocational sector. And that is the wide acceptance program, and also very popular among the school community, and every parents and every students and the school community, they are willing to provide in the 13 years program. That is the mainly technical and vocational oriented program. That is the best practices we are implementing in the currently. That is, we have to improve further that program. That is many of the subject are not only for the teaching, the academic oriented one, but it's the skill oriented program. That is the one of the successful program we experienced during the past period. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Jayantha.
Thanks,
I have a question here for Paddy. What can employers practically do to support education? Example, support curriculum or materials, visits to schools.
Yes, so we are continuously, through the Skills Council, we are continuously supporting all institutions, the hotel school, Evotech, TVEC, and NITA when required. We are upgrading curriculums. We just conducted yesterday for the weekend train the trainer program on hospitality. Yeah. So we can actually work along with the education. This council actually is working along with the education ministry on the 13-year program, and we want the private sector would be very, very happy to assist in any way possible with any stakeholder where the training is taking on or the education is taking on, to be able to give our inputs to ensure that the students actually achieve what the private sector is looking for.
Thank you, Paddy. I hope the audience has noticed that Paddy's connection is a little bit patchy, so a lot of it came through, but thank you. Thank you. I'm moving on to another question. Are there any programs to enhance the methodology of teachers and academics to reach the students more effectively? Nilanthi, would you like to ask that?
Yes, if I were to talk about that in relation to higher education, this is in relation to what we've been talking about, professionalization of teaching and developing the skills of pedagogy in academics, not just their subject expertise areas, but their skills as teachers. And particularly keeping in mind that adult education is not always the same as what we need to be doing in the school system with primary and secondary school children, that is in university, we need to have slightly different approaches. So we do have what we call the induction program for probationary lecturers and some level of initial training, but I think there's a long way that we can go in enhancing the continuing professional development of university academics, and there is, I think, a real need for middle level career development, continuing professional development, an academy that offers short courses that will enable people to upgrade and renew their skills. So, for example, like during the time when we need to, really rapidly scale up our skills in online delivery of education, and people are asking, how do I do this? To have courses that will enable them to get the skills as quickly as possible. So, for that kind of development of university academics, I think there is still a crying need for that to take place in our country. I think perhaps the universities, the school system, the NIE is better positioned to provide that kind of training, and particularly the teacher education colleges. But Dr. Balasooriya would be much better positioned to answer that than I would be. So,
Dr. Balasooriya, would you like to respond?
Yes, with regard to the teacher educators, the National College of Education, they are having in some type of this type of, as Deepthi said, there's that type of programs are implementing at the colleges of National College of Education level, and also the like for example, English education program in the College of Education, they are having in the special fast track initiative for the improving the quality of teachers with the assistant, I mean the development partners assistant, as especially for the British, like a British Council also, they are providing some technical assistance for the improving the teacher educators standard. That is the one thing we can mention here.
Okay, because there was also a question on careers guidance, and careers guidance was mentioned in relation to Tibet, but they also asked what about for schools and university teachers? So, you know, in terms of careers guidance for them.
Yeah, I think with regard to the secondary education, in the number of schools, they are implementing the career guidance program and also in the guidance and counseling program for the, I mean, as earlier TVET sector mentioned about the new pathway, new avenues for the technical sector. In the senior secondary levels, they are implementing that type of program to choose the students which way they are going to for in future. They can use for the academic path or the technical path, like that. There are some avenues, but still we are facing some the skillful teachers to implement the career guidance program at the school level. Across the country, there are some of the schools have a good type of program, but some of the schools, they are having lack of that program. But as a ministry, the widely policy acceptance is given to improving this type of program, and it is going on in the system.
Okay, we have. I think we have time for another question. One more, I think. There is one that says, in this evolving environment, dynamics of higher education depends on entrepreneurial relationships and interprofessional relationships. What are the measures taken by the UGC or QAC to drive our higher education in that direction? At a time, state university education is drifting away from the public interest. Nilanthi.
I'm not quite sure that I entirely understand what is meant by entrepreneurial relationships and interprofessional relationships, but I do know that yes, the universities are encouraged by the UGC to develop entrepreneurial skills among students, to set up university business linkages, and also to conduct career guidance activities, job fairs, etc., on a regular basis, so that students do get some form of career guidance. However, I also feel that that is kind of uneven across universities and across faculties, and so not all students may get the help and the guidance that they need to have. And this is again something that we can strengthen in our university system, and especially for students. I know that the commerce and management faculties, management studies, those faculties do have a good handle on the career guidance side of things, and perhaps even the science faculties. But I am not sure whether the arts, humanities, social sciences faculties, where the bulk of our students are, whether they get adequate career guidance. And that is again an area where we could really strengthen what we do in our higher education system.
Okay, I think I've pretty much covered all of the questions. And I think I will now hand over to Louise. Louise, thank you to our audience for all their questions. And I think we will now have Louise come and take over for the wrap up.
Thank you. Wow, all I can say really, that has just been a really stimulating, really in-depth view of some of the challenges we're facing. So I'd just like to pick up on a few pieces before I move on to what we think we might be able to do. So some of the key things I've heard, one of them was about outcomes-based learning, competency-based learning, teaching and assessment, We've heard that that's used extensively within the TVET sector, but equally it can be used within secondary education and higher education, focusing not just on knowledge, but skills, competence, attitudes and behaviours, focusing very much on outcomes. But of course, this will require a change in teaching practice, how young people learn, their role in learning, and also how that learning is assessed. A second takeaway for me was what I heard about how education providers globally are changing to respond to the current environment. And I heard from colleagues both within Sri Lanka and in the UK about the initiatives that are being taken to adapt. There's some risk-taking in there as well. We're in a different situation. And above all, there's been a lot of innovation that's been introduced rapidly, swiftly, in response to the changes. And one thing I heard at the end was this question about entrepreneurship, intrapreneurship. And again, that for me links in with the skill of innovation and the extent to which this should be embedded within the curriculum. A bit of an aside thought from me there, but do we put this into the curriculum for our young people? I think the third big takeaway was that insight that the President on World Youth Skills Day declared 2021 to 2013 as the decade of skills development. And I think a very interesting comment there is that skills isn't just about TVET or Year 13, but it's embedded throughout our whole education system. It affects young people in schools, university students, vocational students. It links in to what Professor Abeygunawardena was saying in his keynote about the human and social capital we have. So this agenda of skills development has quite substantial impact on wide education system reform. And of course, together with that, we're talking about skills development, employability. How do we engage employers? We've heard interesting insights on the role employers can play in supporting, for example, the development of curricula, materials. Employers can upskill, upgrade, improve the knowledge and understanding of sectors among teachers, among faculty. So as well as needing to link education to the labour market itself is an active partner in the delivery of education. Moving on slightly from those key takeaways, we have heard the British Council's Transform programme mentioned, and also the research we carried out, which the recommendations are now live on our website. And some of the research was briefly mentioned, but I'd like to remind listeners and viewers of it now. Research into English language assessment, which is influencing decisions on a greater focus on teaching, listening and speaking skills, part of those wider communication skills. Obviously, it's not just language, but it's attitude, confidence, how people engage with others. And there was very interesting insight into the role that language, English communication plays in economic growth. Our research also highlights work we are doing in the field of teacher education in terms of methodology, building the skills of teachers in learner-centred classrooms at both secondary level and at higher education. And an interesting concept that may be coming forward is the notion of qualified teacher status, aligned with those ideas of international benchmarking. What are the professional standards education professionals, teachers, lecturers need to have? And surely the requirements in Sri Lanka are comparable to requirements globally. So again, interesting food for thought. Careers guidance was mentioned a few times, and again, our research covers this. And I think what I've heard colleagues say is this is a tool to help young people make an informed choice about their future after school, whether they will look for a job, whether they will look for higher study. And together with those informed choices, for me comes this idea, as mentioned by colleagues, of access points, progression pathways. It isn't always school work, school, university work, but there can be lots of pathways along the way. And it is interesting to note that in response to the changing economic environment, colleges are globally offering higher degrees, and universities are refreshing and reinvigorating their applied subjects. So this notion of multiple access points and progression pathways, I think, is a critical issue to look at in relation to today's conversation. So please do look at the research. We hope it will stimulate food for thought. But we've listened to insights, we've listened to opinions. So what do we do now? I think the first question is, how important is it for us to address these challenges here and now? And what can each of us do in response to these challenges? I know that the colleagues who have been speaking and many of you who are listening and watching are playing a very active role in your respective domains, whether it's in secondary or tertiary vocational, whether it's in curriculum development, assessment, employer engagement. We are all active, but I would like us to come together even more. This is, I suppose, a call to action, and looking at how we can continue this dialogue together. Time is precious and we're faced with many challenges. So please do get in touch with us. Options for further engagement could be mainly online. I do respect social distancing, but options could be forming a small action group or a working group, discussion groups. Maybe we can form a community of practice of individuals and organisations that are committed to taking this agenda further forward. Finally, going back to that initial question that we asked at the beginning of this session, is education a key for economic recovery? I think what we've heard and the ideas that have been exchanged indicate that the answer to that question is a resounding yes. It is important, it is critical, and each of us can engage to make sure that the changes that we need in these very uncertain times happen. And this will be for the benefit of all of our young people and for our society. Thank you.